the foundations. So, Mary Lutyens once asked Krishnji, Krishnji has left behind an enormous body of work. And I don't know whether you are aware that it has been estimated that he left almost, he gave talks, wrote books, had dialogues, and he used almost 20 million words in his life to share his insights, his teachings, almost 2 crore words. And they appear to us in the form of 75 published books, which include his talks, dialogues, and his own writings. In addition, there are almost 700 audio cassettes and 1200 video recordings. And I also want to share with you that almost more than 45 to 50% of the work still remains unpublished. So we can imagine the enormity of the work that was done, that was left behind by Krishnji. So he himself said that I have said many things in many different ways. I have used thousands of words to say the same thing. People were often intrigued by the way in which he expressed himself. Often people thought that he was very repetitive, said different things to different people in response to the same question. He was asked by somebody to summarize his teachings briefly, and he said in one sentence, where the self is, the other is not. This is the essence of the teaching. In another place, when he was having a dialogue with one Dr. Ruben Gonzalez, and he said, "Sir, can you summarize your teaching in one sentence?" Krishnaji said, "Attempt without effort to live with death in a futureless silence." And Reuben responded by saying that it's absurd. What you're saying is just absurd for me. So Mary Lutyens also asked him a similar question. She said that, can you tell us briefly what the teachings are? What is the essence of the teaching, the core of the teaching, the most fundamental meaning of the teachings? Krishnaji used to tell his biographer that it was not possible for him to talk about himself, but maybe together they could arrive at some understanding. Together they could think. He could think if somebody was with him, and together they could come to some kind of understanding. So on Mary's request, Krishnamurti wrote the core of the teaching. That was in 1974 that he was requested by Mary Lutyens. And Krishnamurti himself wrote the core of his teachings as though they were somebody else's teaching. So in that he writes mm, that this is the core of Krishnamurti's teachings. So what we are planning to do today is we'll go through the core of the teachings document, which is not very long. Mm, Sanjeev ji has prepared a PPT, and there are, I think, 8 to 10 slides in it, having few sentences in each slide. So I think it's a very crucial document. Why? Because Krishnaji himself has written it about his own teachings. So yet he has been very objective. So very basic tenets of the teachings have been enunciated very clearly by him, uh, articulated very clearly by him. So let's read it together and try to understand, explain to ourselves, to each other, the deeper implications of what he means by them. So with this, I'll request Sanjeev to start the slideshow, and we'll read it aloud. You can see it on your screen also, and at the same time, I'll read it aloud to you slowly so we can understand, listen to what he has written, and then try and understand. Thank you. This is Krishnamurti himself writing, and he refers to himself in the third person. He says, the core of Krishnamurti's teachings is contained in the statement he made in 1929 when he said, truth is a pathless land. Man cannot come to it through any organization, through any creed, through any dogma, priest, or ritual, not through any philosophic knowledge or psychological technique. So it was in 1929 that Krishnji disbanded the Order of the Star in the East, and he started a journey on his own. So the statement, truth is a pathless land, was made by him in 1929. So he still again reiterates that in that statement is contained the essence of the teaching. So he says further, he has to find it. He has to find truth through the mirror of relationship, through the understanding of the contents of his mind, of his own mind, through observation, and not through intellectual analysis or introspective dissection. Man has built in himself images as a fence of security, religious, political, personal. These manifest as symbols, ideas, beliefs. The burden of these dominates man's thinking, relationships, and daily life. These are the causes of our problems, for they divide man from man in every relationship. His perception of life is shaped by the concepts already established in his mind. The content of his consciousness is his consciousness. This content is common to all humanity. The individuality is the name, the form, and superficial culture that he acquires from his environment. The uniqueness of the individual does not lie in the superficial, but in the total freedom from the content of consciousness. Freedom is not a reaction. Freedom is not a choice. It is man's pretense that because he has choice, he is free. Freedom is pure observation without direction, without fear of punishment and reward. Freedom is without motive. Freedom is not at the end of the evolution of man, but lies in the first step of his existence. In observation, one begins to discover the lack of freedom. Freedom is found in the choiceless awareness of our daily existence. Thought is time. Thought is born of experience, of knowledge, which are inseparable from time. Time is the psychological enemy of man. Our action is based on knowledge, and therefore time. So man is always a slave to the past. When man becomes aware of the movement of his own consciousness, he will see the division between thinker and the thought, the observer and the observed. the experiencer and the experience, he will discover that this division is an illusion. Then only is there pure observation, which is insight without any shadow of the past. This timeless insight brings about a deep, radical change in the mind. So with that, we come to the end of this. The basic tenets of Krishnaji's teachings that he developed for almost 70 years, they all appear in this. They can all be found in this. Time as an illusion, time as thought, time as the psychological enemy of man, the need to observe oneself in the mirror of relationships, the mechanism of creating images, how our perception of reality is influenced by the images that we have, and that truth is a pathless land. One cannot come to it through an organization, through effort, through a psychological technique, through an intellectual analysis, or any kind of dissection, psychological. So most of these things that he spoke about, elaborated on, they are contained in this document that which he called Core of the Teachings. Most of the things have been discussed in our dialogues and in the dialogues that we've been having with other people who appear in this group from time to time, every week. We have seen the document, we have read it aloud. Now, maybe Sanjeev wants to say something. Otherwise, we can go over it once again. Not again the whole document, but discuss some of the aspects that appear to us as important. We can discuss them in the group after Sanjeev has spoken. Thank you.
I think this is a good idea. I just present one or two slides and then we will discuss about that.
Okay, we can read this quietly, all of us, and then Sanjeev may have to say something about it. I think there's a need to mute everybody.
In this slide, as Smooth is talking about a very significant point that we have created a fence around us, a fence of security. It can be religious or political or personal. If we see in our life that the amount of physical security is reached very high these days if we compare early man, or if we compare 200 years ago or 300 years ago. So now physical security, level of physical security is very high. We feel totally protected. We feel totally relaxed sitting in our flats. We have no fear of any leopard or a snake, usually there is no enemy also. But if we see psychologically, we are in extreme danger all the time. So this is a very interesting question, that why we are so afraid, why we are so scared all the time psychologically, even though there is no physical danger, but we feel scared. So what is the reason behind it? I will pose it as a question or something like that, that what is the reason behind this psychological terror which we are facing all the time? Is it because we want to protect our image? Is it because we don't want to be hurt? Is it because we are afraid that something we are protecting or holding will be lost? Or what is the reason? So, what is the reason behind this psychological fear, psychological terror, which we face all the time? So I will just pose this question.
I think anybody can respond to it. The floor is open to all the participants. Anybody can respond to it. I think basically the question that you are asking is, why do we hold on to ideas, beliefs, symbols, relationships, feeling that we are secure in those relationships, ideas, and beliefs, and so on. But it seems that there is no security, and that's the perhaps one reason why we hold on to them very tightly. Even though I feel that money can make me feel secure, I amass a lot of money and so on and so forth. Suddenly, the government policy changes. Certain currencies are demonetized and so on. And then I start feeling insecure. So deep down, I know that the things that I'm holding on to, they are not giving any deep security in a true sense. They create an illusion of security. And I realize that. And the deeper the realization that the things I'm holding on to, that I'm clinging to, are actually not making me feel secure, the stronger is my attachment to those images. The fear is because in fear is because of this realization, even though I don't accept it, that the things that I'm clinging to are actually not giving me the security. There is a very deep urge for a permanent, enduring, lasting security in the mind. The heart craves, I think, security is something that a child demands, that an animal demands. Wild animals have a demand for security. When you remove jungles, when you burn them down, they become violent, they go into human territories and kill human beings, cause loss of property and lives. So the demand for security seems to be a natural demand, psychologically as well as physically. But at the same time, there is this realization that none of the things that I consider as source of security are dependable enough. And so there is a strong attachment to whatever I have, and at the same time, there's a very strong fear of losing what I have, and uncertainty. And if I lose this, I'll become insecure, and there's nothing else to hold on to that can make me feel secure. So there is this constant journey from one kind of insecurity to another kind of insecurity. I think that's the story of our life. That's the story of my life, that I invest in people, things, ideas, beliefs, religion, political ideologies. And at the end of the day, I feel empty and just unbearably empty and hollow inside.
Yes,
And
a very interesting observation. I will just add a little bit to it. Uh, when we are afraid or when we are scared, are we able to see that what we are holding is something logical, is something actual, or just creation of our mind, or it's just an false image or just an imagination that we want to hold, or it is really something. For example, if I want to be little comfortable, I want to protect my body, or I want to be in a state where there is no apparent danger, that one can understand. But if I want that my image, which I have about myself, all should protect that image, all should work according to that image, all should recognize that image, then I think there is a very big conflict or struggle or something like that. So I think it's an interesting thing, right?
Sir,
you see,
I
Sanjeev,
like to question that Chaitanya ji, when he mentioned about the psychological, it is a natural psychological security. I question it. Chaitanya ji.
yeah, please, can you repeat? I mean, did I say
Sir,
that?
yes, you
Please,
mentioned
please.
that it is a natural that the physical security and psychological security. And I question that psychological security, is it natural or something like we feel it is a natural?
So what I said was the demand for security, both at the physical and psychological level, it seems very important for us. There is a need for psychological security. Now, for a person like Krishnaji or for a person like Buddha, they saw that there was no security in the things that human beings, uh, generally cling to, like money, power, relationships, position, talent. There was no security in all that. But yet there was a search for a very deep security, in a very deep sense. And I think that's all I meant when I said that it's a very natural thing for the mind, for the body to search for security, to look for ways that can make us feel secure. But unfortunately, because of our I can say inaccurate perception of reality, one is not able to find that thing, and therefore this search continues. And as Sanjeev said, that I may even see that there is no security in things that I cling to. But my predicament is such that even though I see that there is no security in what I cling to, in who I cling to, yet the attachment continues, fear of losing that thing continues, and at the same time, this sense of insecurity continues. I was just trying to describe that there may be a state where one doesn't know that there is no security in things that I think will give me security. There can also be a state where I realize that what I am clinging to is not giving me security, and yet that attachment and the fear of losing that thing or person may not end. So these two states are something that one I am familiar with. I do not know about a state where I have completely stopped clinging to things, people, ideas, beliefs, and so on, and am prepared to live with a sense of, with a perpetual feeling of insecurity. You see, in spite of this fact that I see that there is no security, people whom who I am attached to, they will eventually leave me, they will die or I'll die. There will be eventually, there will be a cessation of that relationship. In spite of it, this clinging continues, fear continues. That's all I was trying to say. But I cannot say that the urge for security is not is something that is not necessary. I think it's very important for the mind, for the body, to feel secure, to feel very secure, not just in a superficial sense, but to feel very deeply, profoundly secure in relationships. But there, one doesn't find that secure. That's all I was trying to say, sir. Yes.
I have another question. You see, I feel that myself is means like a bundle of lot of images, memories, age old. Is it that unless until this all this images exists, this I exists? Question. Then what is the outcome of that? Is it only seeing that reactions of that, or something else?
I'll wait for somebody else to respond to your question. And we also need to take a pause, make sure that we have some understanding of what has been said, and go into all this very hesitantly, very slowly, not just jump to conclusions and respond, react immediately. I think that's all I'm saying. Not that your question is not important, just waiting if somebody else wants to respond to it.
Chaitanya ji, I'm Joyita Banerjee. I want to talk.
Yes,
I want to speak about something, the previous question, that we are always feeling insecure, and we keep clinging on to something to feel secure. But today is World Suicide Prevention Day. I was wondering from the morning that what prompts someone to commit suicide? That if there is fear and we try to feel secure and cling to something, then, and if we let go of that fear, is committing suicide is letting go of the fear, or is that a bigger enactment of that how insecure I am, that I couldn't cling to my life, the precious life that I have?
Are you asking what are the factors that?
No, not factors. That if clinging to something, we try to cling to something to give us security. That it may be a person, it may be a thing. Then what would prompt me? Isn't it that if all the attachment is gone, I will feel I can finish myself off. If all the attachments are gone, wouldn't I feel like that I have nothing else to do, and I can finish myself? But is that a manifestation of insecurity or seeking security in something else?
You see what you call myself, that myself, the self itself is a bundle of too many things. What I call myself is made up of so many other people. There's a crowd of other people inside me, and they all constitute what I call myself. People, other things, other possessions. That's what I call myself. And if they are gone, if there's a car accident and I lose every member of the family, then I feel I'm completely lost, because it is with them that I had filled myself. So that's what I'm trying, the point that I'm trying to make is most of the things that I'm clinging to are very transient. They are here today and not here tomorrow. They are in a constant state of flux. People I cling to are changing all the time. Uh, Things are changing, beliefs are changing, thoughts are changing, emotions are changing. And I try to build my house on those shifting sands, and I can never find a stable foundation for my house. It's not built on very firm, strong rocks. And that's why this insecurity is there. There is a hope perhaps in the person who goes to the extent of committing suicide. Maybe either it is a complete disillusionment with whatever he attached importance to, or there's a hope that in the sudden ending of life there is something that will make him feel secure. It's very difficult, but it seems to me that it must be a very confused state of mind that eventually decides to put a sudden abrupt end to life. uh, Most probably one has invested too much into something and that thing is lost. Uh, and I think the mind that invests too much in a belief, in an emotion, in a person has already committed suicide, because that mind has never questioned, is this a dog who doesn't like our dialogue? So it seems that the dog says, no, stop barking, let me bark. So I'm saying that maybe the person who has stopped questioning his security, his insecurity, his attachment to beliefs, in a way that person has already committed suicide, because he has not questioned enough. He has not even questioned why he is attached to somebody so uh, strongly, unquestioningly, that the disappearance of that person from life forces me to kill myself. So that is a kind of suicide itself, not that only the physical liquidation of the body is suicide. I think inwardly one has already killed oneself when one stops questioning. One has already killed oneself.
Yes.
Sir, may I respond to that?
Sure, sir. Just make sure that we all have an opportunity to speak and respond.
Okay.
That's no, but please go ahead. I'm just saying this. That's why I don't want that all the questions should be addressed to me. There's so many other wise people sitting here, and I don't know why I have to respond to all the questions. But please go ahead, sir. Please.
Sir, this the means what I see that the suicide, is it physical suicide or psychological suicide? We get the problem with the body, or we get the with the means like our thinking, our thoughts, our images. If it is a, means like a really means like that instrument, the body if gets unable to handle it because of due to lot of means like whatever you name it, accidents or something like very long diseases, incurable diseases or cancer, then that is a better. So end the instrument. If it is a psychological, if it is a psychological suicide, what is that? Is it that image is bothering, or something which that image you are clinging, which you have put lot of energy and time and space for that image is moving? If that image is moving, how you can make it they end that? with simple, how that is a very biggest question. The suicide of the psychological suicide, it is nothing but a ending of that image. So how we can work it? Everybody has to means like have to see this common thread point of that. It is a physical problem or psychological problem. Where we have to where we have to give the word about the suicide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If security is an illusion, then how does one prepare oneself to live with insecurities? Yeah, Mr. Chaitanya, again directed to you.
Artiji, I personally feel that if I can really perceive that security as I perceive it, as I know it, is an illusion. Based on my perception, based on what some wise people have said, based on my own experience, that whatever I have tried to cling to, it has either changed or it has disappeared through because of some reason or the other, or it has itself it has become less important for me now. It is not as important now as it was when I started feeling attached to it. There are so many factors because of which that very thing doesn't make me feel secure anymore, either because of a change in that thing or person, or because of a change in my approach to that thing or person. Now, there are a series of such things. There are so many such things, so many people who have sometime, at some point of time, they have made me feel secure, and I don't find any security in them. And now, based on all this, can I see that that very perception that most of these things that I have sought security in, they don't give me security. Now, I am just wondering if preparing for a life in which there is no security, is that preparation different from seeing that there is no security in all this? Again, let me rephrase it. Now, the very perception that none of these things makes me feel secure, it prepares the mind to live in a state of what I consider to be insecure. But actually, there can be a lot of security in that very understanding that there is no security in all this. It's a paradoxical statement, but if I see there is no security in things that I have put such a great store by, then there is security in that realization also, because then I'm free. There is security in freedom. If I'm not attached to you anymore because I see that you are changing, or you are also I mean, you are not something that is fixed, static, constantly changing. So my attachment to you cannot be fixed, permanent. And that very realization prepares me for that, for what you call insecurity. So in that realization that none of these things people beliefs make me feel secure, there is security in that. That's what I see. That's what I feel. That there is security in realizing that there is no security in any of these things. Yes.
Can I say something on this, sir?
Of course, sir.
Sir, my observation is, outside there is, in the outer world there is no security, because the security, the feeling or emotion or whatever you say, it is coming from the mind. By the nature of mind itself is very limited. By nature, mind is limited. So there will always be fear. There will always be the inadequacy in it, discontent in it, and it will always be insecure. But yes, if one goes inside, then Krishnamurti has pointed out at one place that there is security inside when there is self is not. If there is no center, then there is a freedom which is boundless, what he has pointed out. So I think there can be security there in that state of mind, which he has mentioned that there is a different quality of mind. In that there could be, I think, a security. What do you have to say?
Yes, of course, Krishnaji has said, Buddha has said, there's an island of calmness within each one of us. And if we build our house on that island, there will be security. But it's their truth. They have come upon this. It's their insight. I don't find security in external things. I can invent some security in the inner world. So any meaning that I give to that inner security or external security is a creation, is a figment of my own imagination. Unless I have actually found it to the extent that I don't even know whether this is security or insecurity. Suddenly I come upon a state and I feel that there is no need for any further search now. It has ended. My search for security has ended on its own. Not because I have found the ideal that you described for me the other day and said I must pursue, find that ideal, and then there will be security. Not that. Maybe there is a possibility that though there is no security in the external world, there is a security in the inner world. But okay, let's explore. I don't know whether there's security, because that could also be as illusory, as fragile as this external security is. So I'm saying that mind can invent all kinds of things. Mind can invent all kinds of meanings. It can invent all kinds of securities also. Like there's no security in this policy, but there's a security in this policy. Like you buy a policy for your life and so on. I mean, I can also say I will invest in this inner security and see if there is any, but I may not find that. That security can also be an illusion. I'm saying, can the mind live in a state where it doesn't even invent secure idea of security? It doesn't look for security. It simply lives happily, comfortably with the fact that there is no security in any of the things that I am aware of, and then see what happens.
Or shall we say that there, what Krishnamurti is trying to point out, or whatever we say, that there can be any state of mind in which the question of security doesn't arise it altogether.
Yes, maybe yes. That's what I was trying to say, that even these questions of being secure or insecure doesn't arise. Yes.
Sanjeev Sharma sir. Sanjeev Sharma sir, you can provide him security. If you answer him, he is not to answer. Otherwise, everybody will address and he will remain insecure. May talk of security.
Mention one point. Sir, I want to mention one point. Kindly give me only 1 minute.
Please
go ahead. Ramarao,
sir,
please go ahead.
Sir, I remembered, I read in Krishnamurti, they means like teaching, I read somewhere, to work, the brain works most efficiently, needs a lot of illusions. This one can question it.
Sharma sir, please.
Go ahead.
मुझे लग रहा है कि कुछ Mr. Varghese wants to say something, so let him speak, then I will say.
Okay. Wait. Varghese hand is already up.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Everybody is able to hear you.
Okay.
Your hand is there.
Coming back to the question of security and insecurity, etc. My understanding is that what Krishnamurti says is, see, there are natural, realistic, objective causes for insecurity, and there are psychological causes. If our psychological causes have been managed, then automatically we will tackle the objective, outside, exterior insecurities. Now, Krishnamurti, I've seen him repeatedly say whenever you have a disturbance, a tension, stay with it. Don't try to go out of it. He said, our difficulty is when we are trying to escape, run away from it. I feel lonely. I feel insecure. I feel fear. I feel boredom. Our immediate intention is, how do I get out of this? Because in my mind, I have an image that should be the place where I should go to. And he says that causes a division. My actual state is in this particular state of insecurity. So he says, stay with it, observe it, understand it, and you will find that it just dissipates on its own. Because I've been practicing this, my experience is that this type of thing works. Now, regarding the thing of, can I build a habit of security? If you have to go by Krishnamurti's teaching, the moment we try to get into habits, then we are leading a second-hand life, a stale life. A spontaneous life will have all its ups and downs. And the thing is that we meet it with the full energy that we have at any point in time. And by going into thought, I'm attached to this, how do I get out of it? Is it worth it? We don't get anywhere. Again, we are going back to thought, which is the culprit, according to Krishnamurti, for most of our problems. So what would you, how do you respond to that, sir?
Very interesting questions. So I will start with the question of suicide. Actually, it's very a challenging question. I just want to share something about it. I think as far as suicide is considered, it should be taken as a disease. It's not that a normal condition of human mind. If a person decided to end his or her life, it means he or she is suffering very deeply. And it is a kind of disease, as it's like schizophrenia or paranoid, similar to that when one decides to end his life. So it should be considered as a disease, and it should be treated as a disease. So because if in this state of extreme mental imbalance, no dialogue, no discussion, nothing can work. So we need immediate actions, we need therapy action, we need some medical intervention also. So it should be treated like that, first thing. Secondly, about security and safety, when we are discussing about security, are we able to see that whatever we want to be secured of, whatever we want to cling, whatever we want to hold, is that something real? Is that something actual, or it is something just a fantasy or some imagination to which we are clinging or to which we are holding? So if we can see it that we are searching for a security which is merely imagination, which is not actual in most of the time. I'm not saying that always, but most of the times. So I think this realization is very interesting and very rejuvenating also, because we see that we are unnecessarily fighting for something which doesn't exist. Secondly, when we say that how to be prepared for an insecure life, I think there are strong indications everywhere, but we are not ready to face it, we are not ready to accept it, because life at every step giving us these signals, these indications that there is no security, at least there is no security in the way you are imagining it. But we are not ready to accept it. We are so stubborn. We are saying, no, there is security. We just say that there is no insecurity, but deeper at our heart and mind and soul, we think, no, there is security, because he is my brother, he is my father, he is my husband, he is my partner. So there is security. Because there are some indications of security. The superficial security is there, and we are not ready to accept the fact that really deeply there is no security. So it is not that we need to do anything, we just need to see what actually is. And we are so stubborn that we are not ready to see. I think this is the biggest problem.
I want to say something here.
Sure, sure.
Welcome,
Yeah,
welcome.
Talking about my experiences, I also suffer from a lot of insecurity. So observing myself, I have seen since childhood, the mind is caught up in time. It means I'm trying to achieve something. Either I'm trying to achieve something that today I did not get this, tomorrow I should get this. If I do not get, then what will happen? And other thing is, I'm constantly comparing the past, that maybe whatever I am getting today, will it be as bad as the past? Or if my present is good, then will my future is equally ensured? So the mind from the childhood is caught up in this, what we say as time. So although we have heard that the the power of now and things like that, but if we can somehow step out of the time, uh, I mean, we intellectually I know this, but so this time factor, like continuously, either I'm caught up in the past or in the future, or I'm trying to become something more secure. You know, like uh, so. This training of the mind, being caught up in time, this also leads to a lot of insecurity. That's what I have observed about me. That I'm caught up in my past, and and I'm comparing that my future should be better than the past, or maybe as good as the past. So can the mind really step out of this? That I often question myself.
It's very interesting observation actually. We have been trained in a very strange way that life is not what we are living right now. Life is something in the future. So all that time we are striving for something which is in future. So it's very interesting phenomenon.
May
I
I say
also think,
something?
sir, I also think on this that one has to be mature psychologically. He has to understand psychological aspects of the mind. He should learn more about his feelings, emotions, and work on them. And I think if he, as Krishnamurti pointed out, he remains with the negative feelings, understand the energy behind it, then certainly there can be some change in that. One has to mature with the time.
Mm. May I say something?
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah, there's this stepping out that Sudeshna mentioned just now. I think I'm just wondering if it doesn't begin with questioning. In the document that we read together, in one place, Krishnji says that our perception of life, our perception of reality is shaped by the concepts that we have, very deep-rooted, deep-seated concepts that we cling to. Now, if we start questioning them, including the question that Mr. Varghese asked, like, why is it that I'm not able to stay? Now, the moment you say stay with something, what my mind does, the mind turns it into an idea, an ideal to be pursued. And I start measuring whether I'm able to stay with it or I'm escaping from it. All this starts happening. Somehow, there is something very stubborn, something very adamant that stops me from uh, uh, coming into a direct contact with the actuality of what I am. Like take, for example, this feeling of insecurity or what Sudeshna mentioned just now. I'm not able to step out. Now, I'm just wondering if we can just stop there, observe that my mind is caught up in time. It is trapped in this habit of comparing the past with the present and then projecting the future from that that fixed pattern of thinking. There may be a future which will be different from this. Now, I think questioning these concepts, which seem to be very deep rooted in the psyche, it amounts to actually stepping out of this habitual pattern. Most of them are there, they have taken root because I have never questioned them. The moment I start questioning, their grip on the mind starts weakening. It begins to loosen a bit. I think it's very important. That is something that we need to do. I don't know whether some kind of training is involved, because the training is a word that Sudeshna used, because that also involves time. That I will train my mind so that there is a good outcome, positive outcome in future. I start training now. I reach a point to tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, a week from now, when I'll have that understanding, I'll be able to step out of this. So that training, even questioning that concept, even questioning whether the mind can be trained at all. What is the meaning of staying with something? Because as long as this separation is there, where I think that I'm separate from what I'm observing in my mind, sense of insecurity or fear, as long as I think I can do something about it, I think I'm not able to stay with it. For me, staying with something is like, it's the same thing as becoming one with what I'm observing, not creating any division between what I'm observing and what I am. Because it is that division that leads to all kinds of comparisons, all kinds of activities, all kinds of complications, desires, and pursuit of ideals, pursuit of an imagined state where this does not exist, something else exists. So I think these two very interesting things came up, like how does one stay, what stops one from staying with a psychological phenomenon, why is it necessary to stay with it, and whether the mind can be trained, or when it wants to train itself, again, it gets caught up in that stream of thought, time, and all that, from which it is actually trying to escape. It again gets trapped in that. Yes, thank you.
Sir, what you said, my observation is, if one questions all such things, all such emotions or feelings, and if he stays, as soon as he starts questioning it, and he becomes aware of it, and the moment he becomes aware of it, then he can see the faults in it, what Krishnamurti pointed out. And if you see the truth behind it, then there is a possibility, there can be a possibility that you can become free from it. This is what my observation is. What do you have to say?
Really, confirmation is needed all the time?
Actually, we share our experiences, or whatever observations, because every individual is different and he is having his own experiences or his own views about it.
So is that not staying with the problem?
Sir, will you please repeat, sir? I beg your pardon.
Sir,
can you repeat?
sir, I was wondering if that is...
Please repeat it in some
No, I was just wondering.
Other word. Yeah.
You want me to? No, I was just wondering if that is not staying with the problem.
So it is staying with the problem.
Staying with the problem will involve the same thing.
Wagmare, please let him say first and then please. You stay with question, please. Bhargav, please say it in a better way.
No,
What you wanted
yeah,
to
that's
say.
what
Just
I
say-
wanted to say, that whatever Mr. Bagmari is saying isn't that is staying with the problem. Staying with the problem will involve the same process. And you'll have to go through the same thing, I think.
What I wanted to say is you have to stay with the problem, yes, but you have to observe it and you have to be aware of it totally. And if you are with it, then there is a possibility that you see the false in it, and the truth behind it may liberate you. That's what Krishnamurti also tried to point it out. Many of my, as far as I am concerned, my many things I got free from it by this. Going through this, I should not use the word process, but I remained with it and I got free from it. That's what my experience is.
That's good.
Yes, sir. Hand over to Chaitanya Nagar.
Everybody wanted you. Chaitanya, you don't have any escape.
I need to. I think we need to look at this staying with a problem very deeply, because when we say that we should stay with it, even in that wanting to stay, the mind may function in a dualistic mode, because there is something to be stayed with and there is another entity which is staying. So one has to be very careful, because this staying with a phenomenon, which is very often discussed in Krishnamurti circles, it is not, we have to find out what is not staying with the problem. It is not the same thing as thinking about the problem. It's not the same thing as constantly pondering over it, or it's not the same thing as analyzing it. We need to find out what happens to the mind when it doesn't stay with the problem. What are the different activities that it feels tempted to perform when it refuses to stay with the problem, and not directly start staying with the problem without knowing all the implications of not being able to stay with it. I think that seems to be a better approach, because then otherwise staying with a problem becomes another idea, another ideal. So it has, I think, a profound meaning when Krishnaji says, stay with a problem, or when he says, when you want to understand something, observe it, and look at it, and your look must be silent. It's a very simple statement, but what does it mean to have a very silent look? How does one look silently? It means one doesn't say anything about what one is looking at. One doesn't actually know what to do with what one is looking at. It means that one is not in any way justifying what one is looking at, nor is one criticizing, condemning neither denying what one is looking at, nor liking what one is looking at. It's a very different kind of a quality of mind that he's referring to, perhaps. It's a very different thing that maybe
Voice is
one
not
has.
clear.
Sorry, voice is not clear?
No, go on. The moment I said voice is not clear, it became clear.
Okay, good.
No idea, no ideation. It is really clear.
No. So all I was trying to say is, it is very important to understand very deeply all the subtle connotations of not being able to stay with a psychological phenomenon. What does it mean? What happens when I'm not staying? All the separation between the thinker and thought, the observer and the observed, they happen in that situation when I'm not able to stay, and that leads to so many other complications. I am not able to stay with the solitude of what I am, with that silence of what I am. I keep adding something to it and make it more complicated than it was. I don't allow that phenomenon to reveal itself, to tell me its own story, because I have a reactive mind. The moment I observe something arising in my mind, something else in me immediately reacts, jumps on it, pounces on it, wants to do something about it, and so on. So it's very interesting. I think one has to understand it, give a lot of time. Again, that's a debatable word in a Krishnamurti circle. But I think one needs a lot of patience, lot of understanding, silence. Yes.
Can I speak?
That's all, sir. That's all.
Atul,
Shall I?
Atul Bhatnagar, you are requested because the person who has invited, he wanted to know your views. I am uncle of Sandhya and Desraj. Just for your information.
Okay, thank you.
You please go ahead.
What one feels is that if one asks oneself genuinely, are you a thought? The moment this question comes, in that particular moment, there is no reaction, no response. And immediately after this, there's a rush of, or rather I will say flood of thoughts to fill in, am I a thought? This question. Now, why does this happen? I personally feel with whatever we have talked till now, it has to do with a misconception that human brain has regarding this void, this silence. We talk about this silence as something very romantic, in romantic sense. But actually when this silence comes, we resist this silence. We resist this space and we misconceive it as loneliness, deep loneliness, that you are not with anyone in spite of your being with people, with thoughts, with conceptions, being in various groups, having various thoughts, various activities, achievements. Deep down, there is this loneliness. And if I don't face this loneliness, don't be with this loneliness, the other will not be there, because this is my, I would say, perspective on this particular state, which is always with each one of us. We are just feeling it. Like, why are we here in this Zoom session? We need to ask this question. Is it to fill that loneliness, not being able to sit with oneself in a room, having this, a doubt that people will think that I have gone insane, or what will people say, or have I gone insane? Sometimes this sense of loneliness becomes so great that one sees that probably ending of life is what is required. One is not able to face this loneliness. So it is this loneliness which makes us distract, have various thoughts. We find refuge in many types of things: art, culture, literature, intellectual sharings, and all these things. So what is required is to see the danger of these distractions, that this is a dangerous thing, because we are avoiding something which is always with us, that loneliness. And is it loneliness? We will not be able to find an answer unless until we are with that. That's all I wanted to say. And therefore, there's no psychological evolution, as Kay has said. It is actually nothing there. But we think it is loneliness, therefore it can be changed into something else. So this is the whole time conflict with us, and that actually comes out in the exterior world also, in whatever we do and all types of things we do. We try to fill this misconcept of loneliness, which actually may not be so. But for that, one has to be with it. For that, one has to be with this pain of loneliness, and inquire, as Chaitanya said, inquire, that is discontent. You don't know who you are. That is a basic question. Since time immemorial, humans came, who am I? And that is because of the natural endowment we got, that we got a cognizant brain which questions, and that at one end led us to the outer limits of the space, or to the microscopic level of subatomic particles and subatomic world. But in the psychological level, we never remain with the query because we are afraid of that loneliness. Thank you.
Bhatnagar Sahab, I am having a question to you. Are we not making
Yes,
too
please,
much
sir.
issue of this? Are we not making too much issue of this moment of mind? Because mind by itself comes to life only by the moment. If there is no moment, no mind comes into being. So mind will always be chattering, and mind will having all the time all this nuisance or whatever you call it. May not use the word nuisance, but it will be having all such kind of vibrations or such kind of movements. So can there be any such state where we can just
There is a state, sir. There is a state,
drop
sir,
it?
when you use thought in right place, in right context. If I know the futility and the falsehood of a particular thought, it will drop. But if I don't want to drop because it is making me become something, it is giving me a psychological satisfaction of an evolution, of being something elite or something big, or to manipulate other, or to exploit other, or to empower other, or to be dominate other, then that thought will actually lead me to chaos. But all thoughts are not chaotic. There are some thoughts which are insights also, because insight cannot communicate you with any other thing other than thought. Then thought need not be words only. It will be images. It will be certain abstract concepts, audio concepts. It may be visual concepts, anything of that sort. So I cannot say that thought is in total is wrong. Therefore, Krishnji said thought has a right place. So are we looking at that inquiry? So the inquiry is that what I see as loneliness, is it loneliness? That question has to be asked, but we never ask this question. We fill it with our all explanations. And that's what the escape of thoughts is. We are not using thought in a proper way, which we can.
Sir, what I was trying to say.
Back to Wagmare,
can we just stop?
Wagmare, please let Chaitanya Nagar say something. Please.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Welcome, ma'am. Please go ahead.
So, Dr. Bhatnagar, if loneliness is also an illusion, and if there is no loneliness, and then what is it? That just living with that void is necessary.
See, sir, ma'am, what we are biological entity.
Right.
We are physiological entity, and brain has got this capacity to sense everything, make sense of it, and act.
Yes.
Apart from this, are we anything else?
No.
Or is it all illusion that we have made? So when we see this, why can't we just be open to this, vulnerable to this? Why we want to be something else? A dog never wants to be something else. When it is hungry, when it is irritated, it barks, it seeks food, and rest of the time it is silently sitting in one place. A bird is singing and alert, to everything that is happening in the nature. A flower blooms, withers, doesn't demand anything. Whatever they want, they take. It is only with human mind that we have this great problem because of our illusion. Why? Because in the physical world, we see limitation in space, limitation in time, limitation in capacity, limitation in capability, limitation in being being fulfilled. There's partial fulfillment and limitation of thought. That physically, that thought can achieve only certain things. Then it stops. If you have better tools, the thought can work further. But without that, it will not work. And therefore, unfortunately, we then extrapolate everything into a mental, psychological construct. And there we, जैसे कहते हैं ना अपनी ख्वाहिशें जी लेना. So that sort of thing happens. Dreams and aspirations, and like suddenly people say Veer Bhogya Vasundhara, means at one place we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in Sanskrit, that everything is a kutum. Then you say that can we bhog the kutum, can we exploit the kutum, but other than it says Veer Bhogya Vasundhara. So you have to be brave, you have to be enterprising. Only then you can savor the nature. See the thought, how it moves. At one end it says this, at other end it says that. This is what K was continuously pointing. Do I see this danger? I may see it now, but I don't want to see it because it is painful.
One small question.
Chaitanya Nagar, please, Abhi, time is coming to end. So I request Chaitanya Nagar sir to conclude this because only few minutes are left. So I request Chaitanya Nagar to conclude this.
One small question to Nagar.
No, let Vermaji ask. Sushiji, let Vermaji ask his question. If we have to stop there, we can stay with the question that he puts. Because suddenly I found that my internet connection is very unstable. I lost all connections twice.
But it should be not. It should not be of dog and society, please.
Okay, let Vermaji ask.
Dog barking is over, society is over. So
Vermaji.
Vermaji was open from the beginning, but he did not say anything. So please conclude, Vermaji. You have always got only 5 minutes.
You have already taken 1 minute in this.
Okay.
So, Nagar, you have been talking about pure observation, right? Pure observation a number of times. Pure observation, I is not there. It's a choiceless awareness you were talking about, isn't it? So when I is not there, suffering is also not there, isn't it? So if we can see choicelessly, the person is already a realized person to an extent that he doesn't have to mutate his mind to this state if he is already in this state of choiceless awareness. Pure observation, what more changes are required in mind? He is not there to suffer even. So I wanted to little clarification on that. Because we have been stuck up in this first few lines, that screen. In last this has been tackled. You see, if you see as such, then mind changes or mind mutate or something like that. But he is already a realized person. He is not there. He can see it. Is it a temporary state of choiceless awareness and then comes back to I? And again go. Is it possible to be a temporal state?
I think what you are saying, Vermaji, is true because you are referring to the document that we read together.
Yes.
Krishnaji says very clearly that freedom lies in the beginning of the evolutionary cycle, not at the end of the journey. So I think it's very true that if you have that moment of observation, then the question whether it's an irreversible state or whether it's a temporary state doesn't even arise.
Yes.
That seeing has happened, and now the person who demands that it should continue He has ceased to exist. So the question also doesn't come up.
Yes.
So,
Definitely.
okay, once, and I think that's what you have asked is a very interesting question, whether that state is irreversible or one can get trapped in the ego field again. It's a very, for me, any answer will be very speculative because I don't know. But I think if I am able to see it even once, the way K has described it or the way the Buddha has described it, I think I don't know whether the entity that asks whether this is going to continue will survive that perception. Yeah, it will.
Thank you very much, sir.
It's a no. Let me complete it. I think we have a minute or so.
Please.
I
And
think
I wanted some help from you. Chaitanya, continue this, and I will need 2 minutes more.
Okay. I just wanted to allude to the dialogue that K and Bohm had, in which Bohm questions the nature of insight and says that if it's a flash, then what value has it? Because a flash is preceded and followed by darkness. You see the flash of lightning in the sky, there's darkness before that. And once that goes away, there is darkness again. So what does it have any importance? Because there is darkness before it, after it. Now Krishnaji says something very important, and I think this is something that throws light on the nature of that perception. He says that flash of light, the flash of insight, it removes, it ends the creator of darkness. It doesn't end darkness, it ends the creator of darkness. Now, the question whether thought ever comes back. Of course, maybe it comes. Krishnaji is using thoughts all the time to share his teachings, his insights. But I think, I'm still speculating, maybe you can watch, you can see that they are coming and going. You don't allow them to dominate the whole space, whole consciousness. I mean, they come, they go. You don't say, sit down and have tea and snacks with me. And they don't make a, they don't make a permanent abode in your consciousness. I think maybe that is what happens. Not that thought completely disappears, but as Krishnaji himself has said, you can invite thoughts. When there is a need, you invite, you use them, and when you don't need them, you just let them go. They just go on their own. Again, I'm speculating about that state, but it's a very interesting question, whether that's an irreversible state or it's like any other thing that comes and goes, very transient, very, very short-lived. Yes, Vermaji, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
I think
I request for Calcutta
Sanjeev.
group, whomsoever has come here, I want to, I will give him time again. Just I wanted to request whomsoever has come for Chaitanya Nagar, sir, please come on 20th Sunday at 11, because you two have got on 6 o'clock. So I request you to join. All the faces from Calcutta group are invited. Now please, Sanjeev sir, say. Thank you. Nice of you. Please.
No, I just want to give some time to Mr. Rajesh because he was saying something. So I just want to end with him.
No, I've just forgotten my question. Maybe next time I'll share. Or I'll share in the group with 2 or 3 persons I am in the group with.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, Sanjeev Sharma sir says, I give you 3 minutes, please. 3 minutes, please say something.
I want 3 seconds. Sanjeev.
Yes.
Sanjeev, there is a saying that once a wise man said nothing. So I think Rajesh is that wise man.
Yeah, actually we are trying to say about nothing. So that is the problem with us. We all are trying to say something which is not there. So again, same thing I will say, that whenever it is question of security, or whenever it is question of our endeavor to get something, to hold something, only thing we can do is just take a look at it, that whatever we are trying to hold, what is it? And I think there can be a way, there can be some light, and through that we can go ahead. That's all I want to say.
Sushilji, Adesh.
Chaitanya, can we end now?
Yeah, I think we should end.
Please. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
Thank you,
much.
everyone. Thank you, Pranam.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.